The trail stretched on endlessly, a ribbon of dust winding through sagebrush and sun-bleached rock. Ethan McGraw shifted in the saddle, his back aching from the long ride. The leather pouch tucked inside his coat carried the deed to his uncle's property, though what that property really amounted to was little more than a memory whispered by old-timers. Prospect Hollow, a mining town that had burned itself out when the silver veins ran dry. A ghost town, they called it. But to Ethan, it was all he had left. He'd spent his younger years drifting from ranch to ranch, never putting down roots. When word came that his uncle had passed and left him the deed, Ethan felt, for the first time, that maybe fate was asking him to stop wandering. The late afternoon sun painted the canyon gold when the first sagging rooftops appeared. What he saw brought a tightness to his chest. Leaning storefronts, shattered windows, a saloon with one broken shutter flapping in the breeze. Dust coated everything, as if the town had been sleeping for decades. Ethan reined in his horse at the main street. "Well, Uncle," he muttered, "guess you weren't lying when you said you left me a kingdom." His voice echoed against the empty buildings. But the silence wasn't complete. A thin column of smoke curled above the rooftops. His hand instinctively went to the revolver on his hip. No one was supposed to be here. Prospect Hollow had been abandoned years before, left to the coyotes and the wind. Yet smoke meant fire, and fire meant people. He tied his horse outside the crumbling saloon, boots crunching on gravel as he followed the smoke trail toward the old church at the far end of town. The white paint had peeled away, leaving gray wood exposed, but the steeple still pointed stubbornly at the sky. From inside came the faintest sound, a voice. It was not the gruff bark of a drifter or the drunken slur of a squatter. It was softer, tremulous, almost like prayer. Ethan pushed the door open, the hinges groaning. Dust motes swirled in the beams of evening light. At the altar knelt a young woman. She turned at the sound of his boots. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, and for a heartbeat neither of them moved. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her dress was plain cotton, mended in places but clean. Her long dark hair framed a face untouched by the weariness he'd seen in most frontier women. There was something unworldly about her, as though she belonged to another time. "You're," she whispered, her voice unsteady, "a man." Ethan's brows drew together. "Of course I am. What else would I be?" Her hands gripped the pew in front of her as though it anchored her to the earth. "I've never seen one before. Not with my own eyes." For a moment, Ethan thought she was joking, or maybe addled from loneliness. But the seriousness in her gaze rooted him to the spot. "Never seen a man?" he repeated slowly. She shook her head. "Only in books. Only in the stories Mama told me before she passed." The weight of her words hit him harder than any punch. "How long have you been here?" "All my life," she said simply. "My name is Lydia. Mama said we could not leave. She said the world outside was dangerous, full of cruelty. So we stayed, even after everyone else was gone." Ethan set his hat against his chest, staring at her like she was some vision conjured from the desert heat. "And since your mother passed?" "I've been alone." Her voice wavered for the first time, but her chin lifted with quiet strength. "Until you." The silence between them deepened, heavy with something neither could name. Ethan had wandered through towns where saloons roared all night, where men fought and women laughed too loudly to hide their weariness. Yet here, in this forgotten hollow, stood a young woman who had never laid eyes on another man in her life. He cleared his throat, unsure of what else to do. "Well, Lydia, looks like Prospect Hollow ain't as empty as I thought." She studied him as though trying to decide if he was real. You won't hurt me, will you?" The question cut deeper than she could have known. Ethan straightened, shaking his head. "No, ma'am. I won't hurt you. I'm just trying to figure out how in blazes you manage to survive out here alone. I tend to garden. There's a well. I make bread when I have flour. Mama taught me." She tilted her head, curiosity softening her fear. "You came here because it belongs to you?" "That's right." He slipped the deed from his coat and held it up. "Prospect Hollow was left to me by my uncle, though I never expected to find anyone living here, let alone you." Her eyes lingered on the paper as though it was some foreign artifact. then perhaps it belongs to both of us. The idea startled him more than her presence had. Belongs to both of us. He'd never shared anything in his life except hardship. Before he could answer, the wind howled through the broken windows, carrying with it the mournful whistle of the desert. Lydia shivered, her arms wrapping around herself. Without thinking, Ethan shrugged off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. Her eyes widened at the gesture, and her fingers brushed the rough fabric. "Warm," she whispered, as if she'd never known such a thing offered freely. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir inside him, something he couldn't quite name. Hope, perhaps, or maybe the beginning of a bond neither of them had asked for, yet both desperately needed. Outside, the ghost town creaked and groaned under the settling night. Inside the church, two lives, one hardened by wandering, the other untouched by the world, had just collided in a way that would change them forever. Morning light spilled across the broken rooftops of Prospect Hollow. The old town, long left for dead, seemed strangely alive now. Ethan woke to the smell of bread baking. The first time in years he'd smelled something so warm and homely in a place so barren. He pushed open the church door. Lydia was bent over a small brick oven she'd built from stone and clay, her dark hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She looked up at him shyly, almost startled by his presence. "I thought you might be hungry," she said softly, holding out a rough loaf of bread. Ethan took it, feeling the warmth against his calloused palms. "Hungry? I've been living off jerky and beans for weeks. This here feels like a feast." Her smile flickered, fragile but real. She watched him as though studying every movement, every word. For a woman who had never seen a man, Ethan's smallest gestures seemed to carry weight. They ate in the silence of the church steps, the deserted street stretching before them. The only sound was the distant cry of a hawk and the creak of wood settling in the wind. At last Lydia asked, "Will you stay?" Ethan glanced down the street at the sagging saloon, the broken windows of the general store, the old mine entrance gaping like a wound on the hillside. His first instinct had been to sell the deed, to wash his hands of this hollow place. But Lydia's eyes, full of a strange mix of innocence and hope, made the idea feel wrong. "Reckon I might," he said at last. "But it won't be easy. This town's got nothing left but dust." "Not nothing," she whispered. "It has me." The words struck him deeper than he expected. He studied her, this young woman who had lived in silence, who had learned to survive without ever knowing what it meant to share her life with another soul. She wasn't fragile, not really. She was strong in a way that came from solitude, from enduring. Yet there was a loneliness in her that mirrored his own. That evening, Ethan led her through the ruins. He showed her the saloon, where broken glass still glittered on the floor. The general store, where rusted cans lined the shelves. The mine, where the wind moaned like restless spirits. "It's all so empty," she murmured. "It doesn't have to be," he answered. "With two pairs of hands, we can fix some of it. Make it livable again." Her eyes widened. "You mean we?" He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Reckon it'll take more than just me. And you've been here longer than anyone. You know where the well still runs, where the soil's fit for planting." For the first time, Lydia laughed, a soft, surprised sound, as if she'd never quite tried it before. It filled the hollow street with something new, something living. Days bled into weeks. Together, they patched the roof of the church, cleared weeds from the garden, and brought life back to the town one small task at a time. Ethan taught her how to handle a horse, how to shoot a rifle for protection. She, in turn, showed him where wild herbs grew along the canyon walls, how to bake bread with the simplest ingredients, how to listen to silence without letting it eat at you. And in the quiet of those evenings, when the desert sun dipped below the hills and the stars unfolded overhead, they spoke more openly. "I used to dream of what the world might be," Lydia confessed one night, her voice low. "I'd read books Mama left me, stories of cities, of men and women together, but I never thought I'd see it with my own eyes." Ethan leaned against the church wall, his gaze on her profile in the starlight. "World out there ain't all it's cracked up to be. Lot of cruelty, like your mama said. But there's good too. Good worth holding on to. She turned, meeting his eyes. Are you that good? The question disarmed him. For years, he drifted, never thinking of himself as much more than a wanderer. Yet in her gaze, he felt like he could be something more. I'm trying to be, he said simply. Silence stretched between them, not empty, but full. Full of something unspoken, something that grew with each passing day. It wasn't long before Ethan realized he no longer thought of Prospect Hollow as a ghost town. It was home, and Lydia was its beating heart. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, Lydia stood in the church doorway, her hands twisting nervously. Ethan, I want to ask you something. He set down the tools he'd been using to mend a fence. What's on your mind? She drew a breath, her voice trembling but clear. I've never known another man. I've never known anyone, but I don't want to be alone anymore. If you'll have me, I'd like to belong to you, and for you to belong to me. Ethan's chest tightened. He stepped closer, the fading light framing her in gold. Lydia, I reckon from the moment I walked into that church and saw you kneeling there, I belonged to you already. Her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of a joy so new it frightened her. And in that forgotten town, beneath the endless western sky, two souls who had been alone for far too long finally found what neither thought they'd ever have, a life worth living together.